Bienvenidos, yo soy Sandra Díaz, especialista en narrativas en Alianza Americas, y hoy nos acompaña Leni Álvarez. Leni es pocha, una mujer que regresó a su país de origen, parte de una familia con estatus migratorio mixto, separada por fronteras. Su madre siguió a su padre e emigró a Estados Unidos en la década de los 90, cuando ella tenía 2 años y su hermana aún era un bebé. Durante mucho tiempo vivió en lo que consideraba una burbuja de una vida normal, como cualquier otra adolescente en Estados Unidos. A los 16 años, sus padres tuvieron que contarles que eran indocumentadas. Bueno, Leni, bienvenida, gracias por acompañarnos.
Gracias, Andy.
Me dio mucho gusto que lo pudiéramos hacer.
Sí, que lo podemos hacer en persona.
Sí. Bueno, lo primero que me gustaría platicar contigo, hay muchísimas cosas, pero pensando en quién eres tú, como lo que has vivido y también los roles que tomas en tu vida profesional también. Cuando escuchas a alguien que te pregunta quién eres, de dónde eres, cómo te identificas, ¿qué es lo que primero se te viene a la mente? Empezamos fuerte.
That's a really loaded question. So después de mucha terapia, creo que usaría la metáfora de un lily pad, como esto que está not on a firm ground, and that it might seem that it doesn't have roots, but it actually has roots, and esas raíces son profundas. Siempre me veo mucho como in this in-between, and I would say that I started off as somebody lost in the in-between, and that after many years, I would say, how do I identify myself? It comes more to me as like visions and images. It comes now to being somebody that in the in-between learned that que sí hay vida y que sí florecen las cosas. Porque cuando llegué a ese entre era como desértico, pero también hace unos años tuve la oportunidad de estar en Arizona. And I crossed the border when I was a child, but I don't have any memories, pero escuchar esa palabra desierto me hace pensar en no vida. Me hace pensar en like just that image of when you first hear desert. And I had the opportunity to see how much life is in the desert. And I think about the hopes and the dreams that cross that desert. So I'm not sure if it's a concrete response, but it's more like I see myself as a woman que ha sido atravesada por la migración, como una mujer pocha, pero a la misma vez me veo mucho como una niña. That little girl that lived that experience and is now like trying to learn how to play in that in-between.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I love the metaphor of the desert, because despite it being a desert, like life still grows. Like even, thinking outside of like what's actually people living there and all that, but like life somehow finds a way still.
Yeah.
But yes, and then de niña, pensándote como una niña, do you feel like that's something along the lines of not getting a chance to be a niña, and now it feels like you're kind of doing something that you owed?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think many of us that like arrived in como los 90s, 2000s, and being part of immigrant families, pues nos tocó ser or grow up way faster.
Way too soon, yeah.
Yeah, way too soon. Like being that person que was the interpreter in the doctor's appointments, como haciendo los taxes with their parents.
Legal documents.
Exactly. I
Right.
needed paralegals as children and stuff.
Yeah.
And it took me a long, long time and a big journey to be able to finally start to darme espacio, to lean into the playfulness and lean into como reconociéndome y viendo que esa niña interna, el trabajo que hago es por ella y para ella.
And thinking about, your experience having lived in both the U.S. and Mexico, and correct me if I'm wrong, have you lived about the same amount of years in both places now? Yeah. So when you think about home, do you think about one country or the other, or both, or?
I don't.
You don't?
The concept of home is one, I'll say that like I gave up on that concept. But I think for me, I haven't been able to find another word to be able to narrate from what has been my understanding of home pero así como entendemos casa, que usualmente es un lugar
Right.
muy fijo, muy arraigado, ¿no? Donde podemos pinpoint it in the map, is something that I don't, and I think I've been able to understand that's okay for me.
Mm-hmm.
So no, I don't have a place that I call home and that I understand as home. The place where I came back to in Mexico, my parents are there right now. They move around still a lot. And I actually didn't go back por como 7 años. So it took me a long time.
You were originally from like the
where
place of
where we
origin.
came back to, because
okay.
I was born in Chiapas.
Okay.
Been in internal
Internal
displacement.
conflict, yeah.
in internal displacement as well.
Yeah.
So I haven't found a place to call home.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure if I'm aware of like what that feeling feels like.
Yeah. Because it's uncertain, because you can't really point to it.
Yeah, because even when I was living in the States,
Mm-hmm.
we hopped around between 2 places in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
So Arcadia, Florida, and like Bradenton, Sarasota area.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to 2 elementaries. I think it was like 2 middle schools, 3 high schools, like something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not sure if I've ever really got to like experience like this is home
as we know it.
Yeah, and home as we traditionally know
it.
But that's why I share about the in-between.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that you say that, because dijiste arraigados, muy arraigados. And you mentioned the lily pad, that like why you identify with it is because like you still have roots.
Yeah.
I love that, because it doesn't mean that we don't have roots or we don't know where we come from or what we're standing on. It just means that we're everywhere. In many places.
Y que maybe son otras cositas que nos aterrizan.
Or
that help us to feel some connection wherever we may go and stuff. Pero when you were asking like if you choose one side or the other, this is a question that I've been asked a lot.
Yeah.
And it would frustrate me a lot.
Yeah.
And I remember just coming to the realization that I didn't want to choose one side or the other.
Mm-hmm.
And I just like imagined myself as somebody straddled literally on the wall.
Yeah.
And just looking from one side to the other and just like, I'm here.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel that too. I think growing up in the U.S., it was like, well, of course, my home is the U.S. because I'm here. And then as I started to learn more about my Mexican identity and where I come from, the people I come from, the history, and actually getting to visit a few years ago, I started to feel like, well, this feels so homey as well as what I think home is supposed to feel like. And at the same time, I was feeling very excluded in the U.S. because of politics and everything. So and the rhetoric going on at the time. So I feel like that's when I started getting this conflict as I think an adult already. Because I don't think I was ever too, like, I question why we were proud of being Mexican a lot. But because I left at like 5 years old. So I used to question, well, why are we always so proud of being Mexican if we left? And it took me a while, which is probably why I started like looking into the history and everything and my own connection to Mexico, that I've learned to love Mexico, not so much for like the country in
like
the
nation state.
Yeah, not so much for that or the government,
I agree.
But very much for how like the spirit of Mexican people.
Yeah.
The people we come from, the people I come from in the region that we're from, I've learned a lot, and I feel like that's what I feel some pride in. And not, and I mean, because issues we have in both countries, but I think that's where I started questioning this concept of home as well. So I started learning about all of this and feeling proud of like, you know, the journey I've had, and understanding why I've had it. So, yeah.
I feel you on that. I was really proud to be an American.
Yeah?
I loved the song, literally, and I'm proud to be an American.
Yeah.
Because I believed in the words of it.
Right.
And so there's this book called Les Otros Dreamers. And one of the quotes that just like really, really stuck to me was de la historia de Claudia, that shared like, I'm part of this generation of kids that grew up where they told us that we were equals. It didn't matter race or color. It didn't matter. But we grew up to be adults and they called us criminals.
Right.
And I think that image of me as the little girl, I was really, really proud. I remember a picture of 4th of July, donde tenía todo un vestidote que mi mamá me puso y todo eso, yo bien orgullosa y todo eso.
Yeah.
And I relate to esto que compartes, como, even, I went back when I was 16. So, I left the U.S. with a lot of shame, and it was in Mexico that that shame just kept on growing. And that realization that the place I called home, like, it didn't want me, the rhetoric that you were mentioning, you know, like, that there was no place for me there. And then in Mexico, como compartes, pues as a nation state, pues no. Pero pues sí ha sido como llegar a México y see people that look like me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I went to El Museo de Antropología.
Yeah.
And, okay, when we go to museums in the U.S., you see white people. If you go to an African-American museum, then you can finally see other people. But, like, you see white people who look nothing like you.
Yes.
I went there, and there were people with, specifically my nose, because I feel like growing up, it was an insecurity. And it took a lot of, like, work internally to accept it.
Yes.
And then I go to Mexico, and I see statues with my
Yes.
features. And that was like,
Exactly.
like, wait a second. We have this, like, you know how, like, it's just, we never learned about this stuff over
and
here.
we're from the 90s and early 2000s, so we're like, ahora sí que the standard, like, body was not una de volumen.
Yeah.
Entonces, no, so fue como regresar y decir, wow. Especially, like, growing up in the South and stuff, it was like, I didn't even appreciate my skin tone to a certain point. Because it was, like, you would stick out and stuff. And it was, to be able to go back, I relate a lot that. Eso que compartes como learn que that is beautiful y como quererte y como dices, that's where, like, I feel like I was able to grab something onto.
Yeah.
Al estar ahí.
And it makes you so, because especially, you know, you learn about the beauty standards of that time of like years ago, our ancestors, and that was beautiful.
Yeah.
That's why there's statues of that, you know,
Yeah.
and you just see your features, and it's just wild how different it is having grown up over here and then going back and seeing that, and it's like, I wonder if I honestly felt a little robbed. I think when I was going through the museum and learning about the history, we were lucky to have someone give us like a tour and explanation. She was so knowledgeable. And I started thinking, like, wait, do kids here just learn this, like, normally? Like, what do they learn in school about their own history? So it started to make me feel also a little, like, jealous, I guess. I was like, I can't believe I missed out on that. Like, would have that made my own confidence growing up as a kid different, you know? Because here, it's not your history.
Yeah, I feel you on that. Y también maybe as an adult and the history that I've learned now today es también como esta fuerza, como decías, like the heart of the people.
Yeah.
Como no en una forma romantizada, pero pues también as like global south and las luchas que han vivido nuestras comunidades. And cómo han resistido. And that in the midst of resistance existe el apapacho y existe como el gozo. Algo que a veces pues no se puede palpitar tanto aquí, ¿no?
Yeah, we dance to even sad songs.
Yeah, yes we do.
I love that about it. And I feel like that's pretty, I've heard that from other Latin American countries as well. Like, that's the sazón latino.
Yes, yes it is.
Bueno, te quiero preguntar también un poco sobre el camino o el hecho de que tuvieron que emigrar a Estados Unidos, tú y tu familia. ¿Sabes por qué la familia decidió venir a Estados Unidos? ¿Sí? ¿Sabes cuáles fueron las condiciones? ¿Conoces eso?
Lo conozco. Lo conozco y lo vine a aprender. I remember when I was back in Mexico, I was in business school and I was in an economics class. Y estaba aprendiendo del 94. So I was born in 1994. And the year that NAFTA came into play within our different territories. Y también para México en particular, cuando tuvimos la devaluación de nuestro peso y hubo esta, pues this financial crash that happened in 94. And I was actually last week in a car with a couple of friends. We're all pochos. And we were sharing about our pocho moments, but then it kind of led to like reflecting around like what made us and our families como leave. And we were all hit by 94.
Yeah.
We were all like, that was the reason why our parents had to forcibly migrate. Una amiga compartía que era because her dad had like bought everything to start up a company y de un día para otro ya no tenía nada, ¿no? In my family, I was born en un ejido en el estado de Chiapas, and I was born into an epidemic. And al ir a la clínica local, there was no medicine and there wasn't an adequate medical attention for me. My mom says todavía that when she left the clinic, she saw mom cradling her dead baby. And my parents were missionaries and lecheros. Like my mom would sell bolis outside of a middle school. She says that habían juntado apenas para un down payment for what was going to be our first family home. Because I was born in una casa de palos, de piso de tierra. And my mom says that I had started to gatear. And she wanted for me to have a dignified place to be able to gatear. And they had to go the very next day after realizing that I wasn't going to get medical attention. There was a private hospital, but it was, of course, it was something out of their reach. So they went the next day to try to get that down payment that they had given. They didn't get it completely, pero it was enough to internarme, but it wasn't enough to cover everything.
Yeah.
So they fell into debt. And when the financial crash happened, cuando nuestro peso se devaluó, pues ese debt creció extremadamente. And pues my dad, he was the one que emprendió the journey first. Y pues soon after, myself with my sister, my mom, we ended up in the U.S. And in this case, because my mom wanted to do life and family together.
Yeah.
She didn't want to do it separated. So prácticamente se recuperó de dar a luz y pues a cruzar la frontera. Pero the motivation pues fue financiera y pues por cuestiones que eran fuera de nuestro control.
Y amor, o sea, por el amor a la familia, a ti, a tu vida. Yeah, I think that speaks to how it's not really, you're left with no choice. Like migration is not something that you do lightly. Leaving your country, leaving everything you know. And risking the journey because it could also be risky at times. So I relate to this because I am still investigando más sobre what caused my family to migrate. And I think I don't know if this was your experience too, my parents would just say things like, oh, to give you a better life, like the basic same thing. I'm sure, like, yes, but let's go deeper. And they'll say like, oh, we were just struggling, we couldn't find work, things like that. But I don't think they knew or they weren't aware of like what caused that pain and that hardship. So me now doing a little research, learning more about the history, I would go to like our family dinners, drinking el café and stuff with my grandparents and my parents, and I'll start talking about like, well, this thing happened and this thing, like talking about history, which is also their history that they weren't aware of because they didn't have the opportunity to learn it. And I remember I mentioned the Bracero program. And I always knew of it, and I knew of so many people who, had a connection to that program. And my grandpa's ears like perked up. Like he was sitting in the corner, not really paying attention, but he heard me talk about it. He's like, I think your great grandpa and a bunch of that generation was a part of the Braceros. Like they would talk about that a lot. They tried to take me too. So I just remember just being like tearing up a little bit because I know the history of that program specifically. So I just remember being like, wait a second, like this happened in my my family history. Hold on. And I think that that just goes to show how valuable it is to have these conversations with your loved ones. And I was able to give a name to the pains that they all had. And so that program, once it was ended, like it took the working men who worked the fields, because our whole, I'm from a ranchito, so like our whole region was like farmland that we would have kept working. But all of the men came to the U.S. to work over here instead. So a lot of the lands weren't fertile anymore when they came back, when the program was ended. So that started sort of like a time of instability for that whole community. And the idea of like migrating north started way back then.
Yeah.
But yes, I wasn't too aware of like how 94 impacted my family. But now that you talk about it, I think it probably had something to do with that history, with my family history as well. But yeah, I do love the fact that I can now give a name to a lot of the pains that my parents and my grandparents and so many people in my family had, that they weren't aware. They just knew it was tough. Like that's it. we were just trying to survive and stay together.
Pues todos iban al norte, ¿no?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
This idea that was sold to them. I spoke to my mom recently about like, well, when you came to the U.S., this is what you expected. And I mean, it's 2026 now, January 2026. And I spoke to her a few months ago, and she said, no, like everyone told us, like here we'd be safe, here we'd have like constant, stable jobs, and you all would have an education. Like that was the things that were supposed to happen. And my sister and I both like struggled with financial aid, being undocumented, not being able to find work. My parents, because of their status, or having to take jobs that were very physical, like physical labor, just really tough for them. So yeah, and now I'm curious to ask you, returning to Mexico, you were 16. Did you and your family have an idea of what it would be like when you returned? And is that what happened, or
there was a vision?
There was a vision. Okay.
There was a vision. Uno, I think what you're sharing about the importance of these, like exploring these narratives and tying them with history, is essential.
Yeah.
Because that came after our return. And I remember I carried anger. And I carried like, como, pues, ¿para qué nos trajiste si a la final regresamos? And like, now with an identity that I have no idea, like, just left it in the piece, like, now I'm here trying to pick up the pieces of that, and I think that's something that we've been able to now understand more as a family as well. And that has been essential in como that healing que compartes, And I think pues within our family as well, tanto pues nada más me vine or porque pues estaban las cosas difíciles, pero también pues un sentido de culpa, which I think I saw in particular my mom when we went back to Mexico. Un poco pues it was a failed dream, or it was a failed effort. And situating ourselves within the system is so important, to be able to pues reconocer que hay cositas, hay cosas in the backgrounds que where our experiences are results of history and decisions of a couple of people,
Yeah, that have no idea what the lived experience, like what people are feeling.
Yeah. And what their decisions will impact in generations to come. Y pues so we came back in 2009, and it was a process that started like between 2008 2009. It was during the Obama era, and in Florida there was a law that had been passed where undocumented folks could no longer obtain their license. My dad had always said, como, we're gonna go back to Mexico. Hasta decía como para mis 15 años.
So that was always like a plan?
Like something he would say, but we would never believe it. And I never even questioned on what side of the border I was on. Like, it was just something, I knew I was Mexican.
Yeah.
I don't think I had a lot of that proudness, but because I was raised in the South, my mom leaned in more to assimilation for us, which I understand why. It was for survival.
Yeah.
So I knew Mexico por medio de comida. Pero así como que me compartieran muchas cosas, casi no.
Yeah.
Casi no me compartía, y no fue hasta cuando ya íbamos a empezar a entender que íbamos a retornar forzadamente, que como dices, empezó a compartir like, la esperanza de México y la visión que ella y mi papá esperaban al llegar a México, que era contada por otras personas. My dad, he was detained because of driving without a license, various times. He actually went up to Michigan with a group of men because Michigan todavía estaba dando licencias. And the last time he was caught by a police, pues le rompieron la licencia y le dijeron like, no vale esto, like we know. So he was sent to court and he would have to turn himself in every Friday and come out every Sunday from county jail for a certain amount of hours. And he was able to apelar in front of the judge that he was the sole breadwinner in the family, that he also provided employment for other people because at that time he had a landscaping company. And was the financial crisis hit. Ironically enough, my parents had 2 mortgages. We at that time were living like in a 5-acre ranch in the suburbs, but we also had a home in the city. It was, I would say, hasta cierto extent, I thought the American dream was true until I realized it was like a castle in the sand and just came crashing down. Y pues during that time ya no podían cubrir, como dicen en español, pues el sol con un dedo. So we found out we were undocumented, a bunch of stuff happening in those in-betweens.
So you grew up not knowing that you were undocumented or what it meant? And
yeah. I grew up unaware. I think now that I look back, there were things, you know? There was things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The signs were there.
Yeah, the signs were there. I was just oblivious to them and stuff. ¿Cómo dice? Something is bliss. Ignorance is bliss. Ignorance is bliss. I think that was my childhood for me. And to a certain extent, I thank my mom for that. Pero no borró para nada como that feeling of shame once I knew. It immediately just came into my body. And in the midst of all of this that is happening, that like the castle, like I shared, is just crashing down. We had the conversation. They told us that we were going to be coming back. No les creíamos. We went to el consulado in Orlando. For the first time, I saw mi acta de nacimiento. I realized my second name. I was writing it wrong the whole entire time. I could not even say the town that I was born in, Pijijiapan. It was so hard for me to say. Just many first times that we were living like fast paced. Because no era también como like, my dad was amenazado by the judge. Like, una vez más, y yo te voy a entregar a la migra. Como, so it was the shadow of la migra también. Pues ahí.
Yeah.
At our front door, you know? At that point in our town, like I remember my mom saying, we can't go to church today. We can't go to do our groceries today. Y me decía que era porque pues la migra estaba siendo redadas. And I remember that my mom was living in so much fear que le iban a quitar a mis hermanitos. So like going to the consulado, como doing those things that they had never considered, like they had tried to regularizarse. Desafortunadamente les tocó abogados que los estafaron, you know? So pues all of those situations se juntaron. I didn't believe them, and reality hit. I was in high school already by that time, and I was the first one to come back home. Y cuando llegué, I opened up the door, and there was just boxes thrown everywhere. And my mom just told me, like, these are yours. Like, choose what you want most. Like, we're going to Mexico. And that's when it hit that, oh, we're going to Mexico. What they told us was que they were going to be able to rest in Mexico. They told us that after they were going to be able to be there for us. They thought that going back to Mexico, it was going to be putting up their cyber cafe and like now reaping the fruits of their labor. We met with a friend that was an architect, and we designed what was going to be like our home. I remember I put a balcony on it, and Mexico was far from that reality. yeah, it was far from that reality.
I want to go back to now thinking of Mexico. So you mentioned that you all had this vision of what it would be like, and the reality was really different. What was it like arriving to Mexico for you?
So I remember we arrived to La Frontera on Halloween Day in Texas. I thought we were already in Mexico antes de haber cruzado la frontera, porque ya empezó a verse como Mexico, like como not the U.S. that I knew, you know. And I was clarified, no, we're still in the U.S. And I was like, what? And nos fuimos with our stuff. So literally como se planteó like a road trip, and being the eldest daughter, como también recuerdo like this I don't know if it was a direct ask, pero this understanding that my parents, like, this decision was hard and that they needed my support to be able to kind of help my siblings. Like, this is a road trip, and
kind of hiding the truth, like making it a little more of
suavizándolo.
Like a family trip.
Yeah, and we would do road trips, so like it was something that was part of our family. But yeah, kind of like let's just put a smile on.
Yeah.
When
While
now
they
looking
were going
back,
through the emotions. Yeah.
Ooh, yeah. I remember when we tried to leave, we were taking 2 trailers. Since my dad had a landscaping company, he had like como that equipment, and that they were too heavy, and we had to leave. Like, we had to stop at my tia's house and just leave things in the front of her house, like in her yard. I remember I left the box of books, like, because we couldn't like sift through, you know?
Yeah.
That was the painfulest thing as a 16-year-old
Did you grow up
girl.
loving books?
I did. And I'm gonna expose myself, but it really hurt the Twilight Saga.
Oh my God.
The Twilight Saga.
Were 16.
Yes. It was the time.
Yeah.
It was like right in the heart of it all.
Yeah.
Yeah. I exposed myself, but I promise they're not my favorite books.
Yeah.
Pero at that time, I remember it hurt so much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pero llegamos a México, cruzamos la frontera, y I remember it was a bunch of families, actually. We weren't the only ones. I think what most hit me, because my mom was realizing como que the United States wasn't a place that we could safely be. Yeah. Part of the whole thing that they had sold for us to kind of, like, we didn't want to come back. I remember that entre todo lo que nos estaban trying to tell us about Mexico and like to sell us Mexico, you know, is that pues we were going to feel free, like we were coming home. And I remember, once we crossed like, that point of aduana y eso, like the first thing she did was like tell us to not talk, to not speak, because people were going to know we were coming back from the U.S.
And that was a bad thing.
And we were going to be targeted. Yeah. Like I remember we came to a motel and it was like, corre adentro, you know? I was like, oh my, like
why are we also
like,
hiding
why
here?
are we also hiding here? Yeah. I remember there were kids trick-or-treating. And that was just for me like the most impactful thing of like crossing over, that like in those first hours, those first days, like being told to que no hables, que once again como escóndete, and that feeling that she had protected us so much from, of like living in the shadows. I share this. I felt like I came back to my country to live in the shadows.
So like that moment se quedó muy marcado.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was like a realization.
Yeah. Like the migration journey hasn't ended.
Yeah. That's a really good way to put it.